My name is Emily Carter, and at 29 years old I learned that some people don't wait for you to die before trying to erase you. Sometimes they start while you're still lying in a hospital bed. My mother-in-law Margaret never liked me. She smiled when other people were watching. She complimented my cooking in front of guests. She hugged me at family gatherings. But the moment nobody was looking, she found ways to remind me that I didn't belong. For 7 years I tried to ignore it. For 7 years I convinced myself that if I stayed kind long enough she would eventually accept me. I was wrong. And it took a hospital stay, a missing wedding dress and a phone call from a complete stranger to finally understand who Margaret really was. But before I tell you about that call, I need to explain how everything started. 3 weeks earlier I was driving home from work when a truck ran a red light. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember the ambulance. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital room with my husband Ryan sitting beside me. My left arm was broken, 3 ribs were fractured. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive. Lucky, funny word, because while I was lying in that hospital bed trying to heal, someone was helping themselves to my life. And that someone was Margaret. The first week in the hospital was difficult. Ryan stayed with me every day. He brought flowers, he brought books. He even sneaked in my favorite coffee despite the nurses complaining. For the first time in years I felt like nothing else mattered, not work, not family drama, not Margaret, just recovery. Then one afternoon Margaret walked into my room carrying a basket of fruit. The moment I saw her smile something felt wrong. She wasn't acting concerned, she wasn't acting worried, she looked pleased. "Emily," she said softly. "You poor thing." I thanked her. She sat down beside my bed. Then she asked a strange question. "Long do you think you'll be here?" I shrugged. "Maybe another 2 weeks. She nodded thoughtfully, almost like she was calculating something, then she changed the subject. At the time I didn't think much about it, I wish I had, because that same afternoon while I was stuck in the hospital Margaret drove straight to my house, the house Ryan and I owned together, the house where my wedding dress was carefully stored in a special preservation box, a dress I loved. A dress connected to one of the happiest days of my life. And Margaret hated it, not because there was anything wrong with it, because I chose it. Years earlier she had spent months trying to convince me to wear a different dress. When she selected herself something expensive, something dramatic, something that looked more like Margaret than me, when I refused, she never forgave me. I didn't realize she was still angry about it until later. A week passed, then another. Finally, I was released from the hospital. Ryan drove me home. Everything seemed normal at first, then I noticed something strange. The storage room looked different, boxes had been moved, shelves had been reorganized. I frowned. "Did you clean in here?" Ryan shook his head. No, my stomach tightened. Slowly I walked toward the corner where my wedding dress box had always been. The shelf was empty, completely empty. I stared at it. For several seconds my brain refused to understand what I was seeing, then panic hit me. Ryan. He looked up. "Where's my dress?" His face changed instantly. "Wedding dress." He walked over. The shelf was empty. We searched the entire house, every room, every closet, every storage bin, nothing. The dress was gone, and then Ryan remembered something. Mom had a key. Room suddenly felt colder. I turned toward him. "What?" "She stopped by a few times while you were in the hospital." I felt sick, not angry, not yet, just sick, because deep down I already knew Margaret had taken it. The question was why, and where was it now? The answer arrived 2 days later in the form of a phone call that would destroy every lie Margaret had spent years building. And it came from the woman who bought my wedding dress. The answer arrived 2 days later in the form of a phone call that would destroy every lie Margaret had spent years building. And it came from the woman who bought my wedding dress. My phone rang just after lunch. I almost ignored it because I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. "Hello?" There was a brief pause, then a woman's voice spoke. "Hi, is this Emily Carter?" "Yes, my name is Rebecca. I think I have something that belongs to you." My heart immediately started racing. "What do you mean?" Another pause, then she said the words that changed everything. "I bought a wedding dress from an older woman last week. She told me it belonged to her daughter. But I found your name stitched inside the preservation box." I froze. For a moment I couldn't speak. Ryan looked up from across the room. "What happened?" I put the phone on speaker. Rebecca continued. "Woman said her daughter had passed away years ago and she wanted the dress to go to someone who would appreciate it." My stomach twisted. "Passed away." Margaret had told people I was dead. Ryan's face went pale. "Can you describe the dress?" he asked. Rebecca described every detail perfectly. The lace sleeves, the pearl buttons, the hand-sewn embroidery my grandmother had added before the wedding. There was no doubt it was mine. "Much did she sell it for?" I asked quietly. $100. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the dress had cost nearly $3,000, but the value wasn't the money, the value was the memory. Margaret knew that, that's why she took it. Rebecca sounded uncomfortable. I only called because something felt wrong. The story didn't make sense. Then I found your name online. The first time since the accident, I felt tears filling my eyes. A complete stranger cared more about my feelings than my own mother-in-law. "Thank you," I whispered. Rebecca hesitated. "Would you like your dress back?" "Yes, then it's yours." The next day, Ryan and I drove to meet her. Rebecca lived about 40 minutes away. When she opened the door holding the preservation box, I almost cried. There it was, the dress Margaret had stolen, the dress she had sold. The dress she thought I would never see again. Rebecca refused to take any money. Instead, she handed me a folded receipt. "I thought you might want this." Receipt showed Margaret's signature, her phone number, and the exact amount she accepted, $100 proof, undeniable proof. Ryan stared at the paper for a long moment, then he looked at me. "We're going to talk to my mother." "No," I said calmly. He frowned. "What do you mean? For 7 years she has gotten away with everything because everyone confronts her emotionally." I carefully placed the receipt back into the box. "This time we're doing it differently." Margaret expected tears, she expected arguments, she expected forgiveness. What she didn't expect was evidence. 2 days later she hosted a family barbecue. Nearly 20 relatives attended, cousins, aunts, neighbors, people Margaret spent years impressing. The moment we arrived, she acted completely normal. She hugged people, she laughed, she played the perfect hostess. Then she saw the preservation box in my hands. For the first time all afternoon, her smile disappeared. "Emily," she said nervously. "What's that?" I placed the box on the table. The entire conversation around us slowly stopped. Then I opened it. The wedding dress unfolded across the table. Several relatives gasped. Margaret's face turned white. Ryan stepped forward. "Mom," she didn't answer. "Would you like to explain why Emily's wedding dress was sold while she was in the hospital?" Silence, complete silence. Margaret tried to laugh. "Oh my goodness, this misunderstanding again." I removed the receipt from my purse, then I handed it to Ryan. He held it up. "Your signature." Margaret's hands started shaking. "I was helping clean the house." "You stole it," Ryan said. Her eyes widened. "No, you told people my wife was dead." Backyard became so quiet that nobody moved, nobody spoke. For years Margaret had controlled every story, every narrative, every family gathering. But now the truth was standing in front of everyone and she had nowhere left to hide. One by one relatives began asking questions, hard questions, questions she couldn't answer, questions she couldn't smile her way around. By the time the barbecue ended, nobody was standing beside her, not even Ryan. For the first time in 7 years, Margaret was completely alone. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, because people like Margaret survive when everyone protects their secrets. The moment the truth becomes visible, their power disappears. 3 months later, Ryan and I changed every lock, every access code, every spare key. Margaret was no longer welcome inside our home. The wedding dress returned to its shelf, exactly where it belonged. And every time I see that preservation box now, I don't think about the day Margaret stole it. I think about Rebecca, a stranger who chose honesty when she could have stayed silent. Because sometimes family hurts you, and sometimes strangers remind you what kindness looks like.